Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Omni Athlete. You believe that you can be more, and so do we. We created this show and company to do it with you by empowering your performance with the wisdom and techniques of the world's highest achieving mind, body, and spirit competitors. Okay, so today's guest is a futurist, psychologist, wellness pioneer, computer code developer, and martial artist on a mission to understand the depths of human flourishing. She holds 2 master's degrees in counseling and clinical psychology, a degree in human capital development from Cornell, and a degree in neuroscience that all facilitate her unique capacity to sit at the intersection of exponential technologies, mindfulness, behavior, and emotional resilience as interconnected paths to optimal performance. Her relentless desire to ask the big questions shaping the very fabric of our culture have seen her named to Ross Dawson's list of top female futurists, featured on Forbes, become a collaborator on the Loving AI project, as well as a sought-after advisor for thought leaders, governments, universities, and organizations looking to truly understand the future interactions of humans and technology. It's my pleasure to introduce to Omni Athlete, Liza Lichtinger. Welcome to the show, Liza.
Thank you for having me, Josh.
So the place I want to start is actually a unique place, and it's emotional resilience. I've heard you speak about this eloquently in a couple different places, and I'd love for you to share what that means to you and where that's shown up in your life, both in sport and just in general.
Absolutely. It wasn't until recently, a few years ago, when I was doing research in actually something called synesthesia, which is a state that people can enter. Also, it can be a state that is genetically predisposed for a person. They can be born with it, where there's something like a melding of the senses. So when I was doing my research with traumatically depressed women, I noticed that as they were getting better and improving their human development and overcoming their traumas, they would enter a really interesting state where they had this awe or eureka moment, and they were melding the senses. They were completely sober. And so I wanted to do more research on this, because the only time I myself understood this was during my dance or martial arts practice as a young girl, or when I was inspired by watching a movie or hearing a beautiful song, or those milestone moments. And most people, they recognize these milestone moments as either positive or negative when they're, let's say, getting fired, or let's say when they're getting married, or when they have a bonus, or, what's socially supported. It can be different in different cultures, or when you buy a home, or when you're able to have independence or voting rights or leave your country, specific to your region or country. And so I realized that there's one thing that's super necessary to understand this, and this is someone's resilience, or the world's resilience. So I won't talk about it in the terms of climate change. One example is, for instance, Hiroshima. How can a whole country, including its citizens and the land and the environment and the economic structures, bounce back after this uncertainty and diversity in the climate, in the actual elements, after a bomb or a natural disaster. So that has a very significant role, these natural disasters. How resilient the world actually is a direct reflection and intertwined with the humans that are inhabiting the world and the animals. So resilience, to answer your question, in terms of the human design and the future design stations that are housing these people, really involves the mental, emotional, physiological, and social aspects of resilience. And so how that can look like is, I'll tell you my very EPICC acronym that I use, and it actually is the word epic, but with 2 C's. And so in those studies, what I figured out was there's very accurate and measurable items, right? Pulse, physiological response, heartbeat, but there's always something that's extremely as relevant, but measurable in a different way without certainty or accuracy in the ways of the human body and the human design. And I came up with EPICC, and that involves equanimity, someone's presence, identity, coherence, and connection. And so one example of someone's resilience in the context of EPICC would be, if we look at coherence, for example, you can say a group began to build coherence and the athletes took a unified direction. So one human being, right, is on a certain direction. But when you group a bunch of people together, coherence is something that if someone has that with another, and if there's group coherence, then people are moving together in a certain way, like a unified mind. And so the more resilient a human being is, the more prone they are to be able to enter that state of coherence. So that's just one example of how resilience sets you up to be able to enter these states. And so if someone needs to work with a team, even in business, or if someone needs to choreograph something and work with a team, the element of situational awareness and orientation ties into coherence. And so this is one of my favorite examples.
So what's so fascinating about your model, so EPICC, right, is in this idea of allowing adversity, transcending the adversity, right? And when I've heard you speak of resilience, that was one of the maybe aspects of that word that I had not connected before. And I thought as athletes, it's so natural, right? So adversity, seeing adversity not as something that we either have to run from or fight, but really stepping out of that loop. What does that mean to you? And when we talk about allowing adversity to be an adaptive process for us in terms of performance, what has your research been like there? What have you experienced there?
In terms of adapting to a certain situation, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that people actually are faced with. Most people think about fight or flight, in the situation, in a business interaction, or in a fight. If people are doing striking or sparring, or in a sport where you're working with teammates, right? I think there's something that occurs, and so it's really about reaction time and knowing how to pause and assess the situation. And this can be trained, but I think it takes a really seasoned practitioner to know, to trust this level of insight. So instead of, let's say someone's told that they're going to be laid off, for instance. Physiologically, they start sweating or get a response. Emotionally, they start perhaps feeling sad or angry or rage. Mentally, their mind's going all over the place like a ping pong ball, back and forth and perhaps out into space. And so it's very challenging to be able to adapt in uncertainty and adversity in a situation like that. And so this I'm sharing because most people think of that as a very stressful situation, one of great challenge. And instead of fighting, the situation, it's occurring, it's going to happen, there's going to be a response, and you are in control of your response. And you can adapt to that situation by understanding how to control your emotion, your mentality, and your physiology to respond in the best way for you and for that other person in the situation. So instead of fighting or flying away, it's really about adapting or conforming to the situation. And I think what I do a lot with my clients is helping them understand the personal and customized ways that help them in that situation adapt. Sometimes it's too emotional, so you'll do something like cognitive based mindfulness therapy, which will start with the body first, doing something physical to get the emotions and the mental clarity back. Sometimes the physical's fine, but you need to start with something that's more, intellectual, for the people to then return back into connectivity with their bodies. So hope that answers the question about adapting.
It does. And what's interesting is, what have you seen that's allowed, whether it's clients or what you've experienced yourself, allowed somebody to trust the innate sense of their ability to adapt in those moments? And specifically, what I think about as an athlete, I can reflect on many times, and also just in life, where, just like you pointed out, right? If it's, somebody gets told they're going to get laid off, something goes counter to what we anticipate, and it's an external reminder of something not going the way we want it to, there is this very natural desire that the brain goes, the body goes, we have the emotional response. What does it take to develop that trust that you can step out of that loop? What have you seen, and what's been your experience there?
Integrity, and to be authentic, for people to see who they are in the mirror, to be able to understand what it is that's driving them, what their intentions are, and to, at each moment, as often as possible or every day, to return to that and to understand that their motivations and what's driving them is really at the core of all their behaviors and all their actions. So any type of work that brings a person or a community closer to that, and there's tools, there's books, there's teachers, there's all kinds of different pathways that can lead you to understanding this state within you. And so I think it's really the most necessary to achieve successfully what it is that you're looking to achieve. And success really means to operate from that place of authenticity. One example is, let's say, if you have a high state of intentionality, right? That ties directly to connection, whether it be with colleagues in business or something, or family relationships. To be able to understand yourself and what your intentionality is, it can instantly shift the interactions that you're having in all of those areas. So there's so many different ways, so many people I know that are teaching this, that have been living this, but I think it's really the lifelong practice of looking at all these different pillars and really doing the work. I mean, you have to bring yourself to do the work.
What does it look like when we start to do this work, especially around authenticity and integrity? So what does that feel like, and how does our world change as we start applying those new discoveries or those understandings to the decisions that we're being faced with?
I think the first thing that happens is relief. I think people can enter a state of relaxation when they see direct results and responses of application of these things. It's really about mental models, right? If you value different areas of your life and you have a certain mental model, and it's not working for you, say you're not very balanced, you're not at equilibrium, and you've lost a sense of identity, and your mental presence is out the window, and if you start to put the tools into place, so to answer what it looks like, if you start to put the tools into place to change from that old pattern that's not serving you and move into the new pattern, you'll notice a different response from people that you're interacting with to you. You'll notice that people are perceiving you differently, responding to you differently, seeing you in a different light. You'll notice that whatever concerns you had before perhaps are not as, there's not as much weight on them as you thought prior. You'll look to something and think, wow, that's really easy now. I thought it was so difficult, but it's not. And this is because you're shifting your perspective in your mental model. And what you're doing is remapping and rewiring your brain. And then you're looking at the world differently. You'll have a different response because you're engaging the world from a different space. And often there can be a situation where immediately when you switch your mental model, there'll be a very, very positive outlook you'll have. And to be able to sustain equanimity through this different change in your mental model, you will also see that you'll go back a little bit, right? When you're changing and reformatting and rewiring your mental model and your physiology, it's like working out. Your brain is also like a muscle, and many people have said this. What will happen is that you take a few steps forward, but it's always good to just wait for a moment and let your body recover, right? And then you'll take a few more steps forward and you'll wait, your body rest, relax, let your muscles heal. And so the way that looks when you're changing from the old mindset or old patterns of behavior to new ones, you're going to be elated and happy and experience this whole new situation of engagement with people, with the world, and you'll have this illumination moving forward. But it's also important and realistic and practical to understand that you'll also need steps and more steps and more steps where you're going to process certain information. So I think when people enter a state of flow, when they feel like they're engaging the world and there's a lot of coherence and synergy and synchronicity, that's really because it's being brought from the person. The person is seeing that and seeing things that were always there that they weren't able to see before because of their behaviors and actions and way of engaging, with other people. So I think when this shift occurs, it's really interesting, and people see a lot of different ways that they're impacting and responding to the world.
How has martial arts and or dance affected those shifts for you? Has it catalyzed different ones? Has it created a space for you to process different ones? What has that container been like for you in experiencing those shifts in your own world?
Well, I started dance and martial arts since I was 3, so I don't really know a world where I'm operating without it. So I've always seen through a lens that's been guided by a physical body practice. And so what that does is, one thing I can say is that throughout my life, moving my body has been just natural. It's been a natural thing, and I think humans are meant to be in continuous movement. I don't think we're meant to be sitting in chairs for 10 hours a day. I mean, there's so many things that are probably not that well adjusted. If you want to be pretty healthy person in society, it's difficult to be well adjusted to a society that has you sit in a chair, you know. I don't know what that's going to mean for the future of humans and bodies. And so I'm really a big fan of my fellow movement, you know, brothers and sisters that are leading through example. Just, I don't think it's anything that's that strange or different. I think it's the natural form that a human being was meant to be in, right? To always be moving. We're like this as children, and then we're put in seats to digest and learn information. However, I think that through the movement of dance and martial arts, there's so much information that you're receiving through that framework. I mean, there's so much knowledge that can be expressed or transferred. I mean, stories and narratives are told, you know, through dance. Bengali dance is beautiful. And I think there's different ways of learning and shaping a person. And so this is one of them, right? And I mentioned this one because many people use the body to move or show on Instagram what they can do. And social media is great. It's necessary to build a business. However, or they just try to train, which is necessary for their profession, you know, to go to next year's, you know, objectives and priorities and deliverables. But I think there's so much wisdom in the natural movements of body through dance or martial arts or swimming or running or, you know, even football. And so every time that I go a little bit away from my movement practice, I feel like I'm not fully complete. Like I'm not a fully complete, you know, athlete. And I think every human is meant to be an athlete on the planet. And then the other thing is that I think being able to move is something that helps people. It's one of the ways that people can enter a state of clarity. Some people talk about the flow state. There's mental flow, there's all the different kinds of flow. However, I think if a human being is in this vessel, right? And I so believe that the most powerful gift that you can give yourself is to also understand the physical wisdom. And because we are moving always, I mean, we haven't uploaded our brain yet. I don't know if we ever will, you know, with brain-computer interfaces or, you know, we haven't cryo-freeze ourselves. And I don't know where that's going. I'm really interested in it, have many friends working on it. However, for the here and now, we are in this body. And for a complete design of a person, I think they owe it to themselves to understand their body and be able to be the best and the most optimal as possible. And so I think dance and martial arts gave me a head start to be able to understand how the full balance of a human being can work. So
there's like 5 different questions that are coming up in my brain at the same time. And the area that we have not had a chance yet to dive deep is what the role of sport and play movement, what those roles in our culture, what they take on as technology begins to maybe, I don't know if this is the right word, but liberate some of those cognitive functions, right? Liberate some of that energy that we would spend working in a typical capacity, right? So as you look out over the landscape, because this is a space where you are working, right? You're dedicating energy and putting time into thinking what is going to happen here. What is the role of sport and play and movement going to be as artificial intelligence and other exponential technologies really create and maybe catalyze some of these shifts in what it means to be a human being in the 21st century?
It's a really good question. So there's many athletes that are looking to different algorithms to help them improve their physical and mental capacity. anything from, biohacking, brain hacking, anything that can help people advance their whole system is occurring. I think a lot of what we call AI, but machine learning systems are really helping people in biotech. I think it's helping people create different avenues and opportunities for people that couldn't move before. I mean, you have someone that's a quadriplegic that now has access to not being a quadriplegic and even entering the Olympics, if so be it, if that is the goal of this person. More importantly, though, you have society as a whole changing their perspective on humanity. It's no longer strange to have, I mean, back in the day, if you had a hearing aid and you had this big clunky thing on your ear, you were looked at as somewhat weird. Still, in some places in the world, people don't even know what a hearing aid is. They don't even have access to this. They still are going hungry without water. I think, artificial intelligence is helping in agriculture, helping create different plants and food sources for people organically, with the intention of helping people grow in that way, right? So I think to have some system that can help you achieve certain results with more accuracy is going to be beneficial if it's looked at with benevolence, with the right intention, if it's looked at in a way that can serve and work in parallel to humanity. I think there's all these different uses. I mean, we had the rush of wearables, we had the rush of trans tech, we had the rush of all of these meditation apps, and then yoga, and I think there's still something lacking, right? And I think the whole human being, physical, mental, emotional, social, physiological, I think there's more understanding of how important this whole human being is and how developing your human capital is really important. And so as we move forward in the future, there's going to be different skills and different jobs that people are going to be doing. And so things like emotional intelligence, which was once a luxury for people to have, or something cool, or, oh, wow, they're kind of insightful, will now be more mandatory for the way that people are going to interact. And that is partly due to these technological tools that people are using that are accelerating the way that they interact with each other. The way that we interact is now heavily dependent on a third party. We're rarely interacting human to human. And even though I enjoy this often, in the future of work or the future of social communication, which is beautiful. I mean, we can talk to anyone instantly across the planet. We are using different tools, and there's different algorithms and machine learning that's used to power the systems for which we're interacting. There's a lot of decentralized platforms that are helping people interact and gain information, such as scholarly articles. And so this third party will always be there moving forward. So I like to think of it as there was always this third party. Say you have two people, two humans interacting with each other. There's something else running through them that's facilitating that interaction. I mean, we have blood, organs. Some people believe in a soul. Some people believe in a higher intelligence or religion. There was always that third party there. And so the really interesting thing for me in the future will be how that third party that was always there is going to align with the tech tools that we're building to help facilitate human interaction.
So the image that comes to mind for me is this idea that energy is going to be liberated, right? That there's going to be more, maybe not more energy, but there's going to be energy in the system that was previously put to work elsewhere that might be more human energy, more innate, the emotional intelligence, the spiritual intelligence, the components of the human experience that might still be very unique to us as human beings. And I wonder how that, and I think what the question here is, where is that energy going to get applied, do you think? And in the work environment, it is likely that people are going to want to identify ways to improve performance, right? We have maybe a different kind of energy available in the system. How does that affect performance? The same question can be applied in sports. So as an athlete, as I begin to experiment with biohacking, using different technologies and different algorithms to really optimize my performance, what else is available to me when those technologies are giving my, softer is not the right word, but the emotional intelligence, the spiritual intelligence, the yin to my yang, when it's given more freedom and more ability to express?
Well, I think the question for everyone is, what do I use, and where do I look at, and where do I find this information, and what's too much and what's too little, and can I really just fully biohack my body and think I'm going to be all right? I mean, do I put wire in my head, and people have, and it's public knowledge, and try to use that to help stimulate my brain, and understand different insights with different areas of my brain being stimulated? Perhaps. I mean, I think really it's going to take a lot of people to know what it is they want. I think, well, what are you trying to improve? Don't just go out there and just do the thing that's being marketed, do the next thing for your body, or like anything, right? I mean, we've lived through the times where there was, there's now a kettlebell that's that when you touch it, there's sensors that reads on, you can read exactly what your heart rate is, how many reps you're doing. I mean, do people need that? Why would they need that? Why would that kettlebell, this new kettlebell that was just at CES, we saw it there, be featured? What is that for? Who built that and for whom? Now, let's take this example. There could be a lot of hype, but already millions of people are buying it just because it's the new kettlebell. Some people will never need that. They'll need a normal kettlebell. They know what they're doing. They know what they want from it. Perhaps other people will need it to gain some kind of data. Perhaps I see it maybe in a research study with many people where you're trying to accumulate a lot of data. That's where I see that would be valuable. Or someone that is trying to be extremely precise, and measuring certain things. But is that necessary or isn't it? And I think this is the question. What's necessary? What should we use? What do we not need? What do we need? And I think a really human, they need to know, what level of humaneness they want to remain at, what level of development they're seeking, and what level of becoming, modern is necessary. A lot of people are very comfortable, with what they have. They want to stay where they're at, and once they reach that comfortability, they're there, And that begs the question, is there a lot of self-improvement happening there? Perhaps, they have their own model. Now, I think it really comes down to what a person is looking to achieve. And I think that's the big question. I mean, we're living in an age where people are being decision fatigued because there's so many different options. And now, is there so many different options? Or are we only being able to see all the different options that we weren't able to see before? Some people say that all of these options have already been there, but now we can actually see more options due to being able to be online and see different things. And other people say that there are new things. Of course, I think it's a combination of both. But at the middle of all that, I think it really depends on what you're looking to achieve, what your goals are, and then from there, having really clear understanding and keeping your focus, keeping your focus on what it is that you're going towards. And this, for instance, with my clients, I see as a challenge. So even if you do know where you're going, what you want to achieve, then you can be stuck and have tunnel vision, right? So it's a challenge and actually a very beautiful thing to live in a world where if you're so focused, there's other options. At any moment, there's something else you could see that can help contribute to your path. As well, if there's too many options, there's many systems and tools that can help you to learn where it is that you need to focus.
So when you work with a client and they're struggling to answer that question of what do I want, what's been a maybe consistent, and everybody's different, but maybe a consistent practice or place that you might guide or facilitate them going to begin answering that question with that level of authenticity we talked about earlier?
Well, no one can tell you what it is that you want. You really need to figure it out for yourself. And I think when people don't have all the pressure and weight from others and realize they're in control and they have the power to decide that, then the process becomes a lot more graceful and more fun for them. So I think that's the most important.
So this thread is really fascinating to me because I think a lot of times we have a way of feeling out of control. And as athletes, especially as we go up the higher levels of sport, it's really easy to feel like we've shipped off our control over our schedule, over the way we eat, over the people that we're around, over what we do and don't do. And so knowing that control, reconnecting to that sense of control and ownership is so critical. What allows somebody to do that if they're feeling out of control?
I don't think anyone has control, actually. I think people are under the illusion that they're in control of things. And it makes sense. What happens if you really don't have control? Spontaneous events occur every second of the day, all the time. And I think what it looks like is if an individual is operating from a place where they completely understand that they're in control of nothing, maybe in control that their hand can touch a cup and drink coffee, or that they can manage their funds in a certain way. However, in the bigger picture, anything could happen at any moment. Anything could be said to them, and they're not in control of how another human being is going to respond or react to them. Some people are trained to think they're in control of this, but ultimately not so much. And people are trying to solve, certain scenarios and situations where we're not even in control of our own life. We die and we try to prolong it. We try to take, stacks of pills, and we try to do everything we can to stay as healthy as possible, so we can somewhat control our lifeline. But at the end of the day, I haven't seen that we're in control of the exact moment, where we're going to end our life. Or so I think there's certain things we can be in control of. For instance, if you're looking at your schedule, right, and you're scheduling out your calendar and you're in control of these things, sure. These kind of things you're in control of. But I think operating from a place where, there's certain things you're going to attempt to be as much in control of as you can, simply to be able to function in society and interact with people and set timelines and things like that. However, the core of everything, knowing that at any moment something could occur that is out of your control, I think brings a sense of almost like responsibility back to the person. I think it brings a sense of calmness, and I think everyone benefits from interactions with people where they understand, okay, all right, something happened, let's just move forward, and let's, at a maturely emotional level, work together to move forward and solve this. So the control one is very interesting. In fact, I think the more people realize that they're losing control, the more they try to grasp control, and I think the more you try to gain control of a situation that is out of your hands, the more you're going to go down this road, right? And I think sometimes it's important to just look at things and just let go and just say, okay. And then there's a question, it's emotional behavioral therapy. It's a question called, what's the worst thing that can happen? And I like this exercise, and I like doing this exercise with people theoretically. What's the worst thing that could happen? And have people literally go through and predict all the steps that could occur for all the different results that they could possibly have in this one scenario. And I think having practices like this, instead of just being blind and going into things cold, can help people understand when those situations occur, how to best respond. If we've thought things through. Now, there's always going to be a situation where we forget, or we're stunned or startled. But I think if you've been preparing yourself to know that some scenario could occur, it's kind of funny. You bring humor into it, and you think, well, of course, something happened, and then just we move forward. Now, I think in the state of affairs like this, where there's uncertainty or adversity or something very turbulent, in the state of this turbulence, I think you have a choice, right? You can, and with a practice like that, with a question like this, what's the worst thing that can happen? I think in that situation, you have a choice. Okay, I can default into, this old fight or flight, or I can do what I think may be best for me and everyone else, which would be adapt or conform to my surroundings, and then do what I can from this situation. And I think it works a lot in personal work. I think it works a lot in business relationships, to also add being transparent and be working with integrity. Also, I think it really applies when you're physically moving and training, or perhaps in an athletic practice. If you hurt yourself, okay, maybe my arm's dislocated, and my shoulder. What can I do right now? Am I going to yell at someone? Is it their fault that no? I was just here doing a handstand and I fell, right, on my own accord. Am I going to be sad or angry about it? No. Emotions and feelings are interesting. Emotions are important. Everyone should have them and process them. But holding on to those feelings, it could result in that person going into self sabotage, and they could stay there, or they could respond, okay, shoulder, what do I do? Should I stop this practice? Should I go to a doctor? What do I do here? I already thought that this could happen one day, so I already know it may take 2-3 weeks. I'll just do something light, maybe get it checked out. Fine, and I think it really has a lot to do with how strong you are in your mind. And I think back to your original question about dance and movement and martial arts, I think one other thing that does, other than help you understand physically the flow state, is give you a really strong sense of reality. I think it really aligns your mind and your thoughts. You can't really escape the way you think. You can't really escape who you are when you're doing a practice like this in all earnestness with dedication and devotion for 10, 20, 30 years. I mean, there's things you know about yourself, and you can learn from them and have humor with certain aspects of your character, or seek to change them, the not so beneficial parts, and they're only not beneficial if you're sabotaging yourself or others, and if you have a pattern of doing that over and over again. I don't know if this answered your question, but this is what came out of my mouth.
It's great, Liza, and this has been energizing and incredible. Before I ask my final question, where can these guys go to connect with you online?
Well, my website is Future Design Station, and it's usually where people go to reach me. My Twitter is LICHTLIZA. Instagram is the same. And that's usually how people get a hold of me.
Awesome. So this show is called Omni Athlete because we want to understand what it takes to be the ultimate mind, body, and spirit competitor. So the final question of the show is, what does being an Omni Athlete mean to you?
To be radically honest. It means to be radically honest in all extensions of me, in my training, in my interactions, in my business. So
simple and concise. Wow. Lisa, thank you for being on the show. Oh my gosh. Guys, go dive deep into the work that Liza is doing, and just as deep as you can into her world. So there is this whole side of sport and athletic performance that we haven't even touched on yet here at Omni Athlete, yet it's critical to how we show up as human beings. And that's, what does the future look like? What does the future of technology and sport and human performance and life as human beings look like? And that is the work that Liza is doing right now, answering some of the biggest questions that are facing us as a species, and how movement relates, and how emotional and spiritual intelligence relate to those kind of questions, and what you will learn so fast when you dive into her world, when you see the content she's producing, the work she's doing. You're going to recognize that there is a very real human element to the absolute bleeding edge of science, and that when we can embrace that, it really does open up different questions. It opens up possibility and potential, rather than maybe the fear or concern that is very easy to grab onto in those spaces as well. So go dive as deep in her world as you can, learn what she's working on, and until next time, thank you for watching this episode of Omni Athlete. Hey, what is up, guys? Thank you for watching another episode of Omni Athlete. Please go like and subscribe to our podcast. That is our goal right now, is just to build this community as big as we possibly can, and we need your help to do it. So like and subscribe, share our content, guys. If this content adds any value to your world, that helps you perform, connect, go deeper, go wider, whatever it is that it does for you, if it provides value, all we ask is that you share our content and help grow this community. We can't accomplish our goal of elevating global consciousness through sport without you. You are an integral part of this mission and this purpose, and we need your help. So please go like, subscribe, and share our content, and continue to help us build and grow this community that is truly motivated to not just elevate consciousness, but elevate and shift the very culture of sport, so that we can truly experience the athletic experience in a brand new and energizing way for so many people, guys. So thank you, and please like and subscribe. Until next time.